Hello, good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are signing in. My name is Scott Sinclair. I'm the Senior Manager of Programs here at Cancer and Careers, and will be your host for this evening. For those of you who are dialing in from your phone, if you could let us know by sending an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org with your name and the number that you're dialing in from. That way we can confirm your attendance and make sure you receive all of the relevant follow-up information after today's webinar. Now, if you are new to Cancer and Careers, first of all, welcome. We are so glad to have you. CAC was founded in 2001 to support every person in every industry and every job so that they can thrive in their work and their life after a diagnosis. Cancer and Careers also works with companies to develop their internal systems of support for employees navigating illness at work. This slide has a list of all of our free programs and services that we offer for people with cancer, as well as their caregivers, healthcare providers, coworkers. These include a comprehensive website and a library of publications, which are both available in both English and Spanish, as well as career coaching, resume review, financial and technology grants, access to experts for one-on-one support, and educational events like the one you're about to see today. Now, I'm going to be back at the end of Julie's presentation today to tell you a little bit more about what we have coming up. Now, some quick housekeeping before we get started. If you experience any technical difficulties during today's webinar, please refer to our Zoom user guide, which is linked on this slide, as well as being shared in the chat right now, or reach out to Zoom support directly using the contact information on this slide. Also, please note that today's presentation is copyrighted, therefore the use of AI assistants and/or transcribing or recording devices of any kind by attendees is not allowed. Those who have found using AI or other recording or transcription software during CAC programming will be removed from the event, and you are permitted to return without the AI or recording transcription software. Now, you can also see real-time closed captioning is available for today's event for those who need it, and a caption recording of this webinar will be archived on our website following this session. And to request any additional reasonable accommodations, please send us an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org at least 24 hours before the next live session. Now, for those of you who are seeking continuing education credits, this slide lists all of the organizations who have accredited today's webinar, as well as the required steps for getting a certificate. This information is also available on our website. Now, please note that you are required to complete both the evaluation and pass the post-tests to be eligible for CEs or PDCs. Now, more information on how to access those will be shared throughout the webinar, and if you're unable to complete those today, a follow-up email will be sent tomorrow, no later than 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, for those of you who are planning to request continuing education credits, our accrediting bodies require us to share this slide and let you know that there are no conflicts of interest to report. Now, we would like to hear from everyone, both during our live webinar and after. So as you might know, Zoom has a lot of great features where you can use to interact with today's event as it's happening. You'll notice a chat box in your features panel, either at the top or the bottom of your screen. You can use this to communicate with the CAC staff and other attendees. However, it's important to note that the chat box is not private and it will show your first and last name. So that's just something to be mindful of when or if you decide to use it. You'll also see a Q&A box in your features panel. If you have any questions about today's content, please drop your questions in that Q&A box, and we will do our best to get to everyone's questions at the end of the presentation. And just note, any questions should go in the Q&A box, not the chat box. We don't want to miss anything by putting them in the chat box. And we know the importance of privacy, so there is an option to submit your questions anonymously in that Q&A box. Again, we'll do our best to get to everyone's questions, but please be patient. If we don't have time for your question today, please send us an email at cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we will absolutely get you an answer as soon as possible. Now, additionally, we would love your feedback on the program, and the evaluations mean the world to us. So all of us at CSC are dedicated to creating the best possible programs. Sorry for the fire truck that is going by my apartment right now. It's New York City living for you. So we are all dedicated to creating the best possible programs here, and it is through hearing from you, your insights, your observations, what worked, what didn't work, that we can learn how to make these the best that they can be. So not only do your voices make a big difference in helping us help others, but sharing your experience also with our funders, again, always anonymously, this helps us illustrate the true impact of your support, of their support, and allows us to continue offering these webinars free of charge. So you can access the evaluation for today's webinar using this QR code, which we'll pull up later as well, or the link is being shared in the chat box as well. And you'll also get an email tomorrow with all of this information as well if you don't have time for it right now. So thank you in advance for sharing your thoughts with us. Now, thanks in part to Genentech and P&G Beauty, Cancer and Careers is proud to offer our 11th year of the Balancing Work in Cancer webinar series, which was created to provide anyone whose life has been touched by cancer with concise, targeted information about work-related issues that arise after a diagnosis. Additionally, we would like to recognize Cancer and Careers' year-round sponsors who support all of our core programs and allow us to continue providing resources and services free of charge. Now, to set the stage for today's discussion, I want to briefly take a step back and look at the bigger picture of what people often experience looking for work after a cancer diagnosis. Now, there are many challenges and unknowns with any job search, which can bring up a range of emotions. There can be days where you get a bunch of phone calls for interviews where you feel really great, followed by days where it feels like a nonstop cycle of challenges. And sometimes that cycle is going to repeat itself over and over again. And it's not uncommon to feel overwhelmed or even burned out at the process. So it's important to look for opportunities to take action, and this can help you feel more in control of your experience, despite those inevitable ups and downs, and push past any feelings of stuckness or frustration in the process. Now, we've brought in an incredible presenter to help us do this today, but before I hand things over to her, one more quick thing to note about privacy. So at CAC, we've noticed over the years that people in the cancer community tend to hold themselves to a higher standard than others who are looking for work. Often survivors feel obligated to share more of their health history or their personal information than they have to or they should, and more than somebody without a cancer diagnosis would ever consider sharing. But the reality is, generally, there is no obligation to disclose any details of your health or your health history, either at work or during a job search. And we encourage people to think carefully before they share any personal information about their health or their health history online. So we often hear from cancer survivors going through a diagnosis and treatment that experiences have brought up different ideas and ignited new passions. Many state that they're ready for a change at work. And to take us through this topic, I am thrilled to introduce back Julie Jansen. Julie is a speaker, trainer, coach, author who has helped thousands of professionals find success and satisfaction at work, as well as finding work that is gratifying. So, most important to us, Julie is one of the original coaches here at CAC, and over the years, she has helped patients and survivors with the individual employment challenges and provided expert advice on the next steps. So, like I said before, I will be back at the end of Julie's presentation to go through some Q&A as well as tell you a little bit more about what we have coming up. But so drop all of your questions in the Q&A box as Julie's talking, and we'll try to get to all of them. But without further ado, I am honored to welcome Julie Jansen.
Hey everyone, thank you, Scott. So this is a big topic. We're talking tonight and today, wherever you are. I'm on the East Coast, where Scott is, about how to shift your career and all of the different things that you can do to try to figure out what the heck you want to do next. And so before I kind of don't, jump into the do's, the sort of tips and techniques of shifting careers. I want to just say, Scott, we were just talking about moving the slides too fast, and I already did it. So there's psychological factors that are involved with changing careers and certainly with looking for a job. And as Scott had mentioned, we often hear people say that they want to do something different after they've been through their cancer diagnosis and their treatment, that they many times no longer feel that the work that they're doing aligns with what's important to them from either a lifestyle standpoint or a value standpoint. And it can be really difficult to decide what you might want to do work wise, and how to actually go about changing careers, especially if you're not aware of what all the different types of jobs are out there, the industries and things like that. I mean, we often hear people say, "Oh, I'd love to work with other cancer survivors," but there's a lot of people that just really just want to do something different. And I'm sure you're aware that engaging in a single career or a lifelong trade is no longer and will never ever be the way that most people work. While there's not that much data about how many Americans change careers, that data is scarce, but there are statistics that provide clues to that. So it's estimated that most people will have 12 jobs in their lives. And in the last year, like say 2024, there were 32% of people that were between the ages of 25 and 44 had considered a career change. And since starting their first job in college, about 29% of people have actually completely changed fields. I was talking to a client today. He's 27. He's been a research scientist, and he wants to become an architect, which is very different. So we have him having informational conversations with architects to even see if that would be something that would satisfy him. He just yearns for something creative, which is very different than being a research scientist. And then there was a late 2024 Fast Company poll that found that 52% of Americans would like to make a career change. And I'm mostly focused on America for this webinar. The pandemic and the continuing layoffs, unfortunately, have both forced and enabled many people to reinvent themselves, as well as caused even more people to decide that they want to be as gratified as they can in their work. And I would say, easily in all my years as a career coach, I've never seen so many people focused on changing or shifting their functional areas or industries. So let's take a jump into this slide, which is some of the things that I just want you to kind of keep top of mind as you're going through, if you do decide to go through this career change process, and this is relevant for job search as well. Your attitude profoundly influences everything you do and say. If you're nervous, if you're angry, you're apathetic, this shows. And these are all emotions that other people don't know how to really deal with. So um, definitely keep top of mind how you come across, how your feelings are impacting your communication and your behavior. And it's sometimes hard, having been through a pretty tough time, it's hard to really do that easily, but it is very important. So I'm really, really talking about self-awareness. Flexibility, it's a really crucial key to success. It's definitely not the right approach to put parameters up that would preclude you. So I have a friend in recruiting, and when I ask her on occasion, like, what do you see with candidates and what makes candidates stand out and not? And she said, really, Julie, it's their attitude and their ability to be flexible that makes them stand out the most. While you may not have the same stamina that you had before your cancer diagnosis and your treatment, it's really important that you continually try to think of ways to increase your energy and increase your enthusiasm, because people are naturally drawn to someone who exudes those characteristics. And so just kind of thinking every day of what you can do to work on that is really key. Remembering that you do create your own destiny. Yeah, there sure are things that you can't do anything about, but no one is really out to get you either. So the more that you think of yourself as being in the driver's seat, so to speak, although I can't use that much longer, because I was just telling Scott that I took a Waymo ride when I was in LA last weekend. It was really fun, and there was no driver except for AI. So I guess I have to use a different expression now. But seriously, it's it's really important that you do realize I'm in control with it as much of this process as possible. Exploring alternatives, there's a lot of different ways to work. There's full-time, there's contract, there's part-time, there's freelance, there's an internship. And thanks to COVID, there's still more flexibility on employers' parts to offer a working situation that might be a better fit for you from either a time or stamina standpoint. Your career change will always, always, always take longer than you ever would expect, especially a career change, job search too. But when you have to go through the self-assessment process, which we'll be covering in this webinar, and then make some determinations about whether or not certain jobs are possibilities for you and talking to people and then packaging yourself, it does take a bit of time and you'll feel impatient. And so it's really important to just kind of stay reasonable about the psychological impact of time passing and feeling sometimes, like Scott said, the ups and downs of not being sure when it's going to happen or if it's going to happen. So the next thing is that I want to talk to you about the stuff that, here we go again with this slides. I don't know what's happening today. The This is from my book. I don't know what I want, but I know it's not this, a step-by-step guide to finding gratifying work. And I don't typically talk about my book at CIC, but the truth is that this webinar is kind of based on that framework. So that's why I'm mentioning it. What I did is years ago when I wrote the first edition of this book, I identified the reasons that people might want to change careers. And meaning is definitely number one. And there's six different categories here, as you can see, and we'll dig into each one of them a little bit deeper in a few moments. But where's the meaning? And I gave them these catchy little names, you know. So and then there's been there, done that, but still need to earn for people with larger expenses, bruised and gun shy, a lot of people, a lot of layoffs right now, a lot of people being beat up. And so you have some recovery time that's needed from that. Being bored or plateaued, and then maybe always wanting to be on your own. I talked to a number of younger people in their 20s who really would love to work on their own. They just haven't earned that much money. They haven't gotten a foundation in their career, but I can always tell the ones that are going to come back to that in, you know, maybe in their 30s or possibly 40s. And then the smallest category is the one toe in the retirement pool. So those are my little categories. And so let's just jump into what oh my God, this is wacky today, my slides. So what each one of them really means. So Scott, you see that? I'm going backwards completely. Okay, here we go. Okay, Julie, you did it. So where's the meaning? So where's the meaning? In this category, I surveyed uh, for a couple editions about 350 people. So it's not a huge sample, but that this was the category that most people mentioned as being the most important or the most significant for them, and the reason that they would want to change careers or shift careers. And so there's what I did is I identified 10 different things that could be meaningful for people. And what I want you to do, if you don't mind, is just when I go through each of these six categories, take a look at them, think about how they relate to you and whether they're relevant, so that it gives you an idea of, because you know, I was talking to this guy today and he's like, I don't know why I'm unhappy, but I'm unhappy. And I said, well, it would be important for you to kind of figure out what's missing before you start looking for something completely different. So that's what this exercise does. But this is just briefly, rewards and challenges would be things like more money, recognition, new opportunities. Some people are really just totally focused on an industry or a field, and I find that's more likely with industries such as entertainment, music, media, you know, fashion, those kinds of more creative industries. Expressing your ideals and values, which is really your standards, your principles, your values, which we'll talk about in a few moments. Making a difference. I mean, that's a big one for me. Giving back, sharing, contributing, changing, improving. And then solving problems. Some people just like to solve problems all day. And changing, modifying your lifestyle. I mean, the pandemic did that for all of us. And some of us acclimated really well, and some of us didn't. There's benefits to it and not. But definitely, many people were pushed into that. And most people don't initiate changing their lifestyle because, it's hard for them to do that. And they feel like it's hard to find an employer who would support that. Feeling passionate. I don't think most people feel passionate about their jobs or work, but I think you want to be very interested. If you do have deep passion, then that's great. It's not something that you need to expect, but for some people it might be. Supporting a cause. I mean, I volunteer for Cancer and Careers because the cause is significantly important to me, and it always has been. And so, being able to, believe in a mission, promote a mission, or advocate for a change is part of that. Innovating and creating is really just the guy that wants to be an architect. That's why he said, I just don't have creativity in my work, and I really yearn for that. And then finally, learning. And one might argue that you always want to be learning, and I believe that we all should be learning until the day we die. But some people just need that excessive amount of learning, curiosity being fulfilled, in their everyday work. So, and the most common barrier that I would say that people mention about pursuing meaning is that they would have to decrease their income. People automatically default to thinking that that's what's going to happen. While it is true that if you do change careers into something that you feel is more meaningful, initially you may have to take a cut in your compensation, but it doesn't last forever. And it's more likely that when you're pursuing meaning, you're going to be so much more energized and excited and creative. There's an old book by a woman named Marcia Sinitar, who said, "Do what you love, and the money will follow." And I feel like that's actually very true. So then, the next there, the next one is, oh, geez. The next one is been there, done that, but still need to earn. And so people that fall into this category, like I mentioned earlier, they have some sort of expenses. It could be their kids are in college, or they have an elderly parent that they're, helping out financially, or they have alimony or maintenance payments, or they're just accustomed to earning whatever salary they had been earning. And so with this one, it's really more about planning. And, you know, you can't make a career change just willy-nilly. So you kind of got to think about, who are you? What do you want? What's your financial situation? Have you really ever put a budget together or met with a financial professional? Is there a way that you can reconfigure your job or your business? And what other elements of your career can you actually plan? And planning is boring, but it's definitely necessary. So that's the key to been there, done that, but still need to earn so you can get out from under this category eventually. Bruised and gun shy. There are a ton of people in this group right now, unfortunately. It's really geared towards people who have been, I hate to use the word victimized because that might be a little harsh, but there's something that has, um, you know, damaged them a little bit, maybe damaged their self-confidence, maybe been, negativity in the workplace, whether it's working for a tough manager or in a culture that just isn't a fit, or being laid off, which unfortunately is rampant right now. So whatever it is, the symptom of this and the obstacle in this situation tends to be lowered self-esteem or confidence. People will readily admit to me, I got laid off and I don't have the confidence I used to have. I don't feel like I have as much to offer. So this is all about working on your self-esteem and your confidence, and doing these things that are on the slide, like doing things that you're already good at, reminding yourself of all the things that you've achieved in your life, setting goals that you can achieve moving forward, and having supportive people in your life, and learning new things, and obviously always having some sort of a contingency plan. Bored and bored and plateaued. I had never had so many problems with the slides before. Okay, so bored and plateaued. This is really just someone who's ready to make a change. I remember feeling this way when I was working in sales before I started my own business. I was just bored with the same old stuff. Been there, done that, and bored. Not, you know. So, if you're ready to make a change, the biggest challenge here is trying to figure out how to get yourself out of a bored state or a plateaued state. Because when you're bored or plateaued, you're not motivated. You just don't feel motivated. And if you're not motivated, it becomes pretty difficult for you to think about actually changing careers because it does require a lot of, self-awareness and thought and energy. So the best thing you can do is figure out how you can look at your current job and find ways to be less bored. My my baby brother works at a big tech company, very big name, and he's bored, but what he does is because he's done the same kind of work for a number of years for them, what he does is he volunteers for coaching younger people and speaking and facilitating meetings and traveling and being involved in task forces. And they enable him to do that. And in fact, they encourage it. So that really helps him not feel bored or plateaued. And then the other thing is like, there's always a way to revitalize your situation if you really think about it. It's not your company's going to march over to you and say, "Hey, you look bored. We want to, help you not be bored." You kind of have to be the person who focuses on figuring out what those opportunities might be. And also, it's something I mentioned to someone the other day, one of my clients is like, whatever you're not getting at work, do you have to get it from work or can you get it from your outside job? Because we all have interests and activities and things that we enjoy doing that we neglect because we're so busy working. And if you just kind of said, I'm going to pay more attention and put more focus on learning to play the guitar or um, singing or painting, or it doesn't even have to be that creative, then that might be the answer and the alternative to being bored at work. Yearning to be on your own is people who dream of being self-employed. And there are thankfully a lot of models for self-employment. It doesn't mean you have to buy a business or start a big business and build it, you start it in your garage and build it into, Microsoft. It's really just whatever you want that sort of entrepreneurial or self-employment picture to look like. That's up to you. I'll tell you that the most freelancing is the most common type of self-employment. And people still buy franchises, believe it or not. The food franchises used to be the most popular, but they're obviously the ones with the highest price tag. So service businesses, if you're buying a franchise, are the most successful, cleaning, beauty, signage, pet grooming, those kinds of things. And when you're self-employed, there's actually a lot of challenges. So you're going to have to sell and market constantly, be on social media, which is hard for some people that aren't big social media fans. And then cash flow is always up and down. You may not have a support system. Sometimes people, I know for years, nobody understood why I started my own business in my 30s. I don't even think I understood it. I just knew I wanted to be free and autonomous. But, you really have to find supportive groups. Like I'm in a coaching kind of supervision group with other coaches who all get what it's like to have to go out and get coaching business all the time. And that's really key. And then the ability to, try not to be a workaholic and blend your business in your life if that's at all possible, which it always remains a challenge. So, and then the last is the one toe in the retirement pool. So, everybody does get to a point in life where they're going to want to retire. Some people, I have a bevy of clients right now who have been laid off prematurely in their process, in their thoughts. They would have kept working. Um, and but now they're having a struggle finding a new job. So they're kind of forced into retirement, which isn't really what they had planned. But I think it's about 15% of people who are retirement age don't want to work at all. So it's a pretty low percentage, believe it or not. And this is a time in your life where you can really look at the big picture of retiring and how work will fit into that. And fortunately, there's a lot of different types of work that if you are retired or semi-retired, you can do. But it's really looking at your finances. Where do you want to live? You know, what's important to you, and also what kind of work you want to do. So those are the six types of, you know, groups of where you could fall. And then what I want to talk about next is really the three-step process for changing careers. So it sounds really simple. I make it easy, one, two, three. It's not necessarily simple, but if you do follow this process, I can assure you that it actually does work. So the first is self-assessment, and we're going to spend the remainder of our time talking about that because I feel like that's an area that people really neglect. They might take a personality test online, you know, the MBTI or something. They might have taken something. Whenever I ask someone, when was the last time you took some self-assessments? They're like, oh, we went through this leadership program and I took one then. It was 7 years ago, or oh, I think I took one in college, you know. So I'll hear that kind of a comment a lot, but thorough self-assessment is crucial for anyone thinking about making a career change, especially. So we'll talk about all the things that are important, looking at your personality, your preferences, your skills, your interests, your accomplishments, and kind of looking at what you enjoyed, what you are most proud of, what you are good at, and kind of looking for patterns in that. And it might seem a little tedious to go through this analysis and sort of a delay, but you can move through it pretty quickly. When I go through self-assessment process with my clients, it doesn't take that long. It might take a week or two. And then the second one is just what are the opportunities and what are the obstacles? And I'm going to be highlighting the obstacles a little bit more in this webinar, only because that's what people tend to focus on. But there are a ton of opportunities as well in your ability to determine what your career shift will be. And then, of course, there's always the old action plan, which is very necessary for putting your thoughts into action and making it actually happen. So, self-assessment. First thing to do is really look at what I call your non-negotiables are and your top priorities. So these are your foundational needs, such as financial security, the ability to manage your personal life along with your career, you know, being clear about your priorities. And these are just examples on this slide. Now, you would argue that all of these are important, and they certainly are, I think, but you really want to know that you're not going to budge from the one or two or three things that are non-negotiable unless the rest of the opportunity is so amazing. What are your financial considerations? That's always key, but you want to apply a reality check. Another thing I find is when I'm coaching people where they're working and they're talking to me about wanting to get a raise or wanting to earn more money, I find that because companies don't promote being transparent about money, and what people are paid, and in fact, discourage it heavily, that people really have no clue what other people earn in a similar job. So there's a lot of uh, sort of salary survey information out there that you can uncover. There's a lot of sites, salary.com, expertsalary.com, payscale.com, Glassdoor's so, even though they do post salary information, it's not the most reliable source. Even the government, US Bureau of Labor Statistics sometimes can be somewhat reliable. Randstad, there's a ton of them. So I would suggest that, especially if you're looking at shifting careers and you don't know what, like the architect guy that I keep using as an example, you don't know what architects make, well, go out and do some research because it may well be that you're not going to be able to pursue something just because of the finances. And then, you know, I hate to even put this bullet on a slide of sacrificing compensation for a different culture, learning, or balance. But the truth to it is you can't have everything. So you kind of do have to sacrifice and at times and decide what's most important to you, especially when it's financial. So, and then what drives you? What actually drives you at work? Are you motivated by status or leadership opportunities? Do you want to have a lot of fun at work? I mean, I don't know how many people have fun at work, but I think that's possible. Is it really important to have like-minded colleagues? And is the work itself or the role itself going to provide somewhat of a path to your ambition if you do indeed have ambition? So those are all things to think about as well. How much autonomy do you need? I mean, everyone values freedom, there's no question. But with greater freedom comes greater responsibility and greater accountability. Many people thrive in a more structured and well-defined environment. So think about which one you are. What are your intrinsic motivations? Do you need, some people don't need fulfillment or purpose from work. Um, I mean, it kind of contradicts what I was talking about earlier about looking for meaning. But like I said, I identified 10 different types of meaning. So meaning isn't always helping people or believing in a cause. It could be something that's a little bit more self-focused, and that's fine. It's your meaning. So that's totally up to you. But just make a decision about whether or not you really need it. And then, do you need work to bring you joy or creativity or adventure, or is work just a means to an end? And it definitely is for many people. How will you grow if that's important? When I'm coaching people in their 20s, they're always focused on getting promoted and learning, which is as it should be. They want to realize their potential. And while everyone says they value learning, unfortunately, most jobs are structured in a way that the the job or the role prioritizes getting results and performing tasks and duties, not learning. So but there are industries and there are cultures who really are centered around offering employees learning opportunities. And, I would say there a lot of the tech firms are like that, financial services, not so much. So, and then there's all the industries in between. So that's another thing for you to think about. Reflecting on your work priorities. So this is a list to review. Um, and I'm not saying that you can't have all of these, but it would be unlikely, I would think. So I would always take passion over a paycheck. Not that I don't need to earn money, but someone else might take a paycheck over passion. How important is recognition and impact, the culture, the work environment, all the things that we kind of touched upon a little bit earlier. And then work setting preferences, what are those, risk versus security, long-term career goals? I mean, it's amazing when I created this. I mean, and there's a lot of extra stuff in here that's not even in my book from when I wrote it years ago. It's amazing that how many things you can think about that will help you make your decision about what is next for you. It's almost overwhelming, even when I go through all these options, I think, wow, this is a lot of stuff to think about. And now this stuff gets into like where you can take tests for a lot of these. And these are the things that are actually that I have little quizzes for in my book. Your values, I talk about values a lot. Um, Values are those things that imbue your life with meaning. They're inherently valuable to you and your well-being. It can range, there's over 100 values. It can range from autonomy to building something to spirituality to family happiness, physical activity, you name it. But I think if you didn't do any of this other stuff that I'm talking about in evaluating yourself and self-assessing, I would say your values are probably number one and the foundation for everything else. Because if you get yourself into a work situation where your values aren't being met, I often say this in my webinars, it really feels like you're walking down the road with a stone in your shoe. That's what it feels like. So you really want to be cognizant of what your values are and realize that as you move along in life, your values will change. If you start to have a family or you're, towards the end of your career, your values will be very different. And that's perfectly acceptable. Your attitudes, this is something I kind of made up, but we've talked about confidence a little bit when we talked about bruised and gun shy. But your attitudes are things like how confident are you? What's your level of self-knowledge? How well do you manage relationships? I mean, networking is a huge part of learning about the external world and about jobs. And without strong relationships to help you, the process of exploration can be very lonely and very painful. You need other people, you need relationships. So when younger people ask me, well, what advice would you give me about the skills I need? Almost always I say the number one is, not so much networking, but your ability to develop and sustain relationships and have them be reciprocal relationships where you're helping others. People are not just helping you. Staying motivated, it's hard to stay motivated in a process that is so ambiguous. But as I mentioned earlier, when I talked about energy and enthusiasm, it's up to you to maintain your motivation, because if you're not motivated, you're not going to reach your goals. It's just impossible. Speaking of goals, goal orientation, that kind of goes with having a focused plan for achieving. I'm a big fan of, like, and I still do this after all these years in my business. I have little goals for every week of what I want to achieve. And they're not like to-do lists. They're things that I want. Maybe I want to learn something, like I want to get better with AI or, whatever it is. And that really it energizes me when I have goals that I meet. I feel proud of myself, and I think we all need that as humans. And a professional commitment. I mean, if there was a time where you were professionally committed to um, your work, try to go back and think about that and remember what it was that excited you, that energized you, that made you feel really committed and embedded in your job and your company and your industry. Because if you think about that and it comes back to you, then it'll kind of help guide you towards how you can sort of find that in something new. And so that's a pretty important process. So other aspects of self-assessment. We all have a personality. We're all born with it. Really, if you have children, any of you, you know that I don't have children, but I know that your personality is pretty much developed by the time you're a year and a half to 2 years old, if not sooner sometimes. And so you can change aspects of your personality preferences. It's not like a fingerprint where you can't change it at all unless you burn it off, but it's definitely in you, intrinsic in you. So being well aware of what your personality type is. I mentioned the MBTI, Myers-Briggs type indicator, the most reliable, validated personality assessment there is. Here, what I did is I came up with these little categories. Are you introverted or outgoing? I mean, you know what an introvert gets energy from things and data, ideas. Outgoing usually gets energy from people. Are you an idealist or are you a realist? Idealists tend to imagine possibilities, love ideas, and tend to focus on the future and what could be instead of what exists now, where realists are kind of both feet on the ground, take things more literally. And are you emotional or factual? You tend to be focused on feelings and personal values. If you're emotional, factual is someone who's more geared towards analysis and laws and rules and policies and data. And structure or spontaneity. Um, I have so many meetings. I mean, if I have like 22 meetings a week on average, and they're very scheduled. I had to show up here for this on time. But my natural tendency is to be spontaneous. So on the weekend, I cringe if someone says, let's meet at this time. I always try to get a ballpark time so that at least I can fulfill that side of my personality when I'm, not working. And then the last one is assertive or acquiescent. And that would be, someone who's more dominant or more of a go-getter. And then acquiescent people tend to be a little bit more passive or prefer to be behind the scenes. So know who you are, know what you are, whichever personality test you take. Interests are interesting because people will think sometimes, well, if I'm interested in music or I'm interested in baking or I'm interested in agriculture, then maybe I could do work that relates to that. And maybe you can. However, I find that most people that get involved with work that relates to their interests end up not liking it and kind of losing their taste for whatever it was they were interested in. So you need to be really careful about that. doing that. But I would say that people are drawn to like a couple of the two of the four things on this list. So it would be people, which is anything related to interacting with people. So it could be teaching, persuading, coaching, directing. Ideas or things like, theories and concepts. Um, data is data's big, big, big right now still. And so these people tend to be more realistic and drawn towards numbers and schedules and financials and things like that. And then objects are something that I'm really hoping will continue to come back into play in our country, which is the trades, because we're really losing talent rapidly in all of the trades. And how many times have you heard, excuse me, the elevator broke in my building, my apartment building, and they couldn't find anybody to repair it because it was something that it was an elevator. It's a newer building, but it was an elevator part that nobody knew how to repair. And I hear stories like that all the time. So if you like working with your hands or machines or repairing things, then this would be the one of the things that would be interesting to you. And then finally on this slide, favorite skills. So the reason I call it favorite skills is that by the time you're 30 or 35, you have, believe it or not, at least 100 skills, if not more. Most people can't open up a document and type 100 skills, though. They get lost somewhere around 10. But if you really tried that as an exercise, you'd find that you really do have a lot. But you don't, just because you have a skill doesn't mean you want to use it. Um, Sometimes you've just used it for too long. And there's also something called untested skills, which means it's a skill that you wouldn't mind using, but you have never used it. So you find it important to learn it. And that's sometimes, a lot of times when people change careers, the untested skills falls into that. So that's what favorite skills is. And then that's the whole self-assessment piece. So it's huge. So just break it down and just look at the things that are important to you as far as maybe what you don't know as much about yourself or what may have changed over time. And then we'll jump into the roadblocks and opportunities. So these are the ones that I said they seem a little negative, but they're the things I hear over and over again. So I have to address them. So I'm going to have to take a decrease in pay. Number one, that's what I hear the most. And maybe you will initially, maybe you won't. But the only thing I want to say about this is the second bullet, which is you do a really good job of packaging your transferable skills and your experience, being able to talk about it, being able to put it on your resume and your LinkedIn profile, and being able to share it with your network and with potential new employers. And you will find that you won't have to worry about this quite as much. The next thing is, I don't have experience in the industry I'm interested in. Well, that happens a lot. Um, Businesses and organizations are pretty much structured all the same. They all have finance and sales and marketing and IT and operations and customer service. So find a way to relate your experience to the same functional area in the new organization if you can. Always try to get experience in an industry if you can. And again, there's a variety of different ways. I listed these earlier in a different context, but getting on a board, volunteering, part-time consulting, get a project, interning, will give you some experience in learning about the specific industry. And then, of course, always networking with people who are in the industry already. I don't know how to find a company that will allow me to express my ideals and values. And that's really pointed towards culture. So the best way you can find out about a company's culture is not from their website and not from some, survey or some award that the company received. That's all nice, but it's not necessarily accurate. You really want to talk to people who worked there, or did work there, work or worked. So those are the best sources, and just coming up with some really sharp questions to ask them about the culture, specifically the areas of the part of the culture that's important to you. And then you'll learn so much more about the culture of a company. I'm too old. Okay. I people with passion with drive, with courage. They make changes at older ages. If you want to make a change, you'll make a change. It might not be an easy path, and you need to be realistic. If you're 55 and you've never worked in the music industry, it's probably unlikely that you'll work in the music industry unless you start your own music company or your own label or something. But that, as an example. But there are also many companies and many industries that are open to hiring boomers, and you just have to figure out who they are, you know. So that's, I mean, there is ageism. I'm not denying that, but it's definitely surmountable. I don't feel passionate about anything. As I mentioned earlier, passion's not a requirement for changing careers. So just think about activities and hobbies that you've been drawn to and haven't tried, or that you used to do and you don't do anymore, or what interested you as a child or a young adult. Or maybe you're just looking at your basic needs, and your basic needs just need to be met, but you can't meet those in your current job or career, so you're going to have to find a new one. I'm not technologically savvy. So that's, you have to have a basic competence with software. You don't need to be a whiz, you don't need to be a coder, but try using. I mean, I always think about my dad who died a long time ago, but he didn't have any technology experience. And when he was in his 80s, he learned, he played poker on his computer, and he did crossword puzzles on his computer, and he emailed and everything. And he's a smart guy, but he got very comfortable with it because he was doing it for fun. So sometimes if you just do things for fun with technology, it'll be a little easier to incorporate it into your work. And just think about digital communication as a way to be more efficient and just reach more people, which it certainly is very good at doing that. So on the opportunity side, I only gave opportunities one scant little slide, but it doesn't mean that I don't think there are a plethora of opportunities out there. And so it's up to you to figure out how to find those opportunities. So always talking to people, that's always going to be number one on my list. Um, People who know you, who know what your skills are and your strengths are, and how people think of you and what you've achieved. And sometimes it's just really hard, even if you go through that thorough self-assessment process, it's really hard to look at yourself objectively and say, oh, well, I would be great at this. It's not always easy to do that. So you do need the input of strangers and people who know you. Obviously, research, research, research. There's so much available out there, thank goodness. And then identifying trends. There's a lot of trends. And then this is one of my favorites, is what are all the problems that need solving? And what I'll often tell a client is, if they can't think of what they want to do next, is go out there and just walk around for a week and take your device, and whenever you see something that isn't working, write it down in your device, and then take all those things that you wrote down, because there will be a long list, and go back and look at them and say, is there anything that I could do to contribute to solving one of these problems? And it really unlocks your thoughts and your creativity, and it's a really interesting exercise, I think. And then finally, the action plan. Always write an action plan down. It does not need to be 15 pages. It should be one page. Your goals, using that old SMART formula, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic on a timeline. What are your goals? Because you always have to have a timeline. And then your action plan is going to be flexible based upon the fact that you're going to be showing it to people. You're going to be trying to implement it, and you may hit a block and need to revamp it, so you're revisiting it constantly, and then run it by your advisors. So before I turn this back over to Scott, because I know we're running out of time, I just want to say that the takeaways, because it was a lot of info. Changing careers is absolutely possible with the right preparation. Understanding your work situation and why it motivates you to change careers is key to identifying your wants and needs. Taking diverse types of self-assessments is definitely needed to create an effective action plan. And don't let perceived roadblocks or obstacles deter you from pursuing a career change unless you know they're realistic. So I will turn it back over to Scott.
Thank you, Julie. That was wonderful as always. Just before we get to the Q&A, and again, if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A box and we will do our best to get to everybody's. This slide has some resources on job search that you can look into further if you have any more questions or want to read up a little bit more. And then we have upcoming webinars too. Our monthly program continues next month with Balancing Work and Cancer, which is sort of CAC's signature program of a little bit of everything that we do and talk about here. And then following that is going to be our two-part Communicating Effectively series, which I'm going to be personally presenting. You don't need to come to both parts. It's different information in each of them, but it's not, if you miss the first one, you're welcome to come to the second one. Or if you can't come to the second one, we'd love to still have you at the first one too. And then our West Coast conference is coming up on October 25th. West Coast is basically the time zone that we're doing it in, but it's going to take place on Zoom, so you can join from anywhere in the world. And registration is currently open for that. So we hope you'll join us there. And then, oh, Julie, I just had what happened to you. It jumped back at me. I
It's
don't know what this,
contagious.
there's some gremlin in the computer
I know,
today.
I'm telling you.
If you have any questions too after today, my email is on this slide. Feel free to reach out, and all of our social media handles are here as well as our newsletter where you can find out all the things that are coming up here at CAC. And then this slide, again, just to reiterate, anybody who is seeking CEs for this evening's webinar, these again are the steps to getting your certificate, as well as all of the accrediting bodies for tonight. And again, all of this will be sent in an email tomorrow by 5 p.m. if you can't take care of it today. And then I will leave up this QR code to get our eval while we go into Q&A. So Julie, the first question I have here is, what's a realistic time frame you should give yourself to career shift? Meaning, if I have a goal to be in a new career in 6 months to a year, is that enough time if I start the process now?
I think a year is more realistic. But if you can do it in 6 months, bless you. But yeah, definitely a year. I mean, it takes because it depends on, it also depends on where you are in the process. Like you've already self-aware, you already know what you've identified, then that's different. But if you're really starting from scratch, which is my focus with this webinar, then it might take up to a year.
I feel like it can take 6 months just in the active job searching
Right.
portion of it. And, everything is different and it could take up to a year or 2 years or, you never really know. Um, Let me see. We just got a bunch in. I'll answer this one question that we get every time. Do I need to disclose that we've had cancer on a job application? The answer is no. You are not legally responsible or obligated to disclose any of your health history or your diagnosis, your prognosis. There are some people who feel like they have to tell a future employer about it. Maybe you have to miss work every Tuesday for a treatment, or you're still getting energy levels up, or whatever your reason might be. And we usually recommend waiting a little later in the process before you disclose that information, because you want to give people the time to get to know who you are as a potential candidate, as a potential employee, as a person, without having any biases put on you against or used against you before they get to know you. Um, the Julie, feel free to add anything to that, but I think we've
You
been through
covered
this before.
it.
Um, a lot of my work experience have been driven by my health, what I can and can't do, and it's getting to be a smaller box every time I have a new diagnosis come up. Any advice?
Well, I mean, I think that it's all about just how much work you can do, what kind of timing it is, like what are your what accommodations do you need? So you unfortunately you have to frame it around all of those things, your needs related to
Yeah.
your health is comes number one, versus probably what you really want to do. But I still think that there's a lot of part-time freelance, remote kinds of situations that you can pursue. There's a lot of that out there still available.
Yeah, I think you can kind of do your own self-assessment too about like what do you feel like you're capable of doing, and maybe how can that
Yeah.
to Is it a remote job? Is it a part-time job, et cetera, et cetera. And if you want to talk through this one-on-one, we have trained staff and social workers who can walk you through some of this too. If you want to reach out, cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we can make an appointment, get on the phone or something, and work one-on-one there as well. We're actually at 7 o'clock, so I think this is going to be our last question. If we didn't get to your question, I'm so sorry. Please shoot us an email, cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we will make sure that we get you an answer to any questions that we couldn't get to today. Uh, the last question I have here is, I've been thinking about a career change since before my cancer diagnosis and never pulled the trigger. I'm a year into treatment and finally feeling good about starting a job search. I was in a customer facing sales role before I found out but I found it too stressful. I'm interested in moving in the direction of marketing instead. How do you think I should go about positioning myself to make that change? What skills should I be highlighting?
So marketing is broad, but I would say that whatever area of marketing you're interested in, try to get like a freelance project, with even if it's like a friend or a family member or a small business or, again, I don't know what type of marketing you're interested in, but that would be to get some experience, which will give you some confidence, and kind of be, low impact, challenge wise. That's what I would suggest. And then just go out and have some informational conversations with people who are in marketing and ask them what their advice would be.
Yeah, I love that idea. Also, just think of your transferable skills. So, like, if you're working in, sales, you're talking to people, you're interacting, you're having that face-to-face time, which can be something that a
Yeah.
marketing job will also need as well. And, sit down and think about how those skills that you have can be referred over to a new career, new industry, whatever it is as well.
Usually it's just the technical skills that seem like that are in the way that you don't have, and those can be learned. But to Scott's
Yeah.
point, your soft skills, you probably have all the skills for marketing. So if you need to be a better writer, you need, to learn a certain tech platform, you can do that
Yeah.
for
And we were
sure.
just talking
Yeah.
today internally about there's tons of free courses you can find out online, Coursera and all those kinds of things, as well as like
Yeah.
Harvard, I know is putting a lot of their classes online for free. You can audit them for free. So
Yeah.
you can, build the skills that you don't have pretty,
Right.
not, I don't want to say easily, but accessibly these days.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Julie, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you
Right.
so much once again for joining us. It's always great to have you here. Thank you all for joining us around the world, wherever you are, and we hope we'll see you next month. Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.